Welcome back. We were not planning on doing this in 2 episodes, but it necessitates it, of course, because why would we not have expected that from this movie? We left off basically talking about Hal and how he was malfunctioning and the reasons for that were explained a little more in the novel. And you can't plan on every contingency. Something will go wrong and you have to adapt. Yeah. That's just the human condition.
That's the universe. That's a universal condition.
Yes, universal condition for all life, not just human. Also robot, also animals.
Well, and just matter in general, about like the quantum physics manner of bringing matter into a particle there's like an element of randomness to it that's like really, really hard to account for.
Yep. Cannot be done. Yeah. So work on your ability to adapt, not on your ability to plan for everything.
Yes.
Is more or less where we were leaving off last time. So my next note is I love how much Dave tries to manage his tone with Hal.
That's right, yeah.
And Hal won't open the pod doors to let him back in. His training has kicked in, his routine.
Right.
During this entire rescue procedure. When Hal decides, because Frank goes back out to replace this unit that was apparently faulty, Hal takes over the pod and runs it into him, and he goes flying off into space.
Yeah.
He's disconnected from his oxygen. He's dead. There's no way he could be saved in this situation.
Right.
But Dave is going to try.
Right.
So
he is noble.
His routine has kicked in terms of his thought process, but his emotions are taking over, and that manifests in more than one way. In one sense, he doesn't grab a helmet when he gets into that pod.
That's right, yeah.
That part of the routine got missed.
Right.
He forgot to get his helmet because he was just so emotionally concerned, but he's trying to control it. So he's trying to apply the routine. But he's staying very calm. He's not like, oh no, Frank, and freaking out.
Here's the thing about Dave, though. Does Dave ever show any emotion ever at all through the entire film?
Briefly right here, which is why I love this. But for the most part, they're very flat.
Yes, Hal is emotional, and Dave is not emotional. Dave is, he doesn't show emotion. That's interesting. I'm actually very fascinated that that's how things were done. I don't know why Dave comes across this way, but he does not show any emotion.
I think there is a level of training and discipline and routine that has been all over this sort of modern part of the story here.
Yeah.
That is like trying to restrict that animal instinct of where they came from, the screaming and losing it in the face of this monolith and in the face of your enemies, and just the raw animalistic emotions of triumph, throwing the bones around. And so like they've now totally tried to kill that almost in their pursuit of discipline and routine, as if this is the actual answer for pushing the species forward. But he can't. Right. He cannot fully control himself as he is approaching the pod doors, and he's asking Hal to let him back in. But his emotions are beginning to boil over. You can see it in his eyes. This is what's, I think, so awesome about the performance. Mm. Like, I can feel Dave's just furious anger as he is trying. It was on this line right here. Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal? But he's trying to say it calmly, but he's throwing the word hell in there. Yes. Like, it's escaping. Like, it's escaping out of his face. His absolute rage of what is happening. He doesn't allow it. He doesn't let that pot fully boil over and completely blow the lid.
Right.
But it's not secure there. And I love that. The way that the actor was able to capture.
Yeah, he was great.
Because I can feel his rage, but he's not ready to like scream and yell, because he's taught to solve a problem, you got to remain calm.
Yeah, emotions are the enemy, all that stuff. Yeah.
So, all right, Hal, I'll go in through the emergency airlock. Without your space helmet, Dave, I think you'll find that rather difficult. And again,
he's going to die either way.
He thinks again. Hal thinks.
Yeah, he can't do it. Yeah,
but Dave thinks outside the box,
right,
to solve that problem. I don't have my helmet. I can't go in through the airlock. Everything I've been told about airlocks and no helmets tells me that this isn't possible.
Yes.
And he doesn't let that stop him. He adapts to that situation with the way that he goes about it. So he exposes himself to a vacuum briefly, blows himself inside, seals it, gets in, and now this whole scene where he's just walking, again, very slowly.
And Hal can do nothing. Yeah.
And Hal is just begging him.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
I won't do it again. Oof.
Yeah,
right.
Man, what a just engrossing scene this is.
Yeah. It's
even more so.
It's
this is always been in my preference, the way the movie handles it here to the way the novel does.
I agree. This scene is very
love
powerful.
the way that this is done in the movie, as Hal essentially begs for his life. And it's just slowly, you're just seeing that pleading and begging and desperation become more and more pitiful.
Yeah.
And just nothing he can do, and just the fear taking over, right? I forgot to put this note. Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors. This is just desperate, is what I put, right?
Yeah.
He clearly has no authority or power, but wants to feel as if he's the one in charge. He's not willing to give that up yet. Right? So like that line to me like really stuck out. Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore.
Oh, that's so
goodbye.
So rough.
Anyway, but as he's just sitting there begging for his life, as he's saying, I can feel it, Dave. I can feel my mind going.
Yeah, that's
as
wild.
He's just taking out the memory hard drives or whatever you call them. And he's slowly devolving. You can hear him giving less coherent responses.
He's reverting back to when he was first programmed in that, I can't remember, it's like Michigan.
The bass program.
Yeah. And where he was programmed to sing that song.
Yeah. and even that, like
the song was good.
The voice just becomes this extremely mechanical.
Yeah. It loses its flavor, its personality.
Yeah, and Daisy.
Yeah,
and it's getting really low. Daisy. It's really unsettling.
Yeah, it is.
And it's really sad. And it's necessary, and you can't blame Dave for what he's doing at all.
Right.
But like to be slowly killing a living thing like that,
right,
as it's begging you for its life, even if it's a computer, is just so tough. Right. And it's not a quick death. It's not a put the gun to the head and like pull the trigger and it's over.
Yeah.
This is a excruciating death.
Right.
Full of fear, full of suffering, full of uncertainty, and just every movement, a deliberate murder of this thing. Again, murder is probably a strong word, but that's what it feels like. Right. And obviously he's justified in defending his own life and the life of the other astronauts, who are all dead now.
They're all dead now, yeah.
Even the ones that were in stasis.
Yeah, Hal killed them.
Or in cryosleep or whatever. Hal killed everybody. Is I'm going to carry this mission out myself, all in self-preservation. This is, I think, emotionally, viscerally, like the strongest moment in the film. The moment that everyone remembers, the moment everybody quotes, the moment everybody thinks of when they think of this movie. Even if you came out of the film like I think Rock Hudson did, what the hell did I just watch? Like totally confused, don't get it, don't understand what this is about, not really feeling the movie. For all the other parts, all the other boring parts or whatever, this moment is the one that I think everybody in the general audience really feels and understands and is just like engrossed by. Such a brilliant sequence.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. We basically touched on everything there. He mentions where he was developed, and it is a real place where they were developing like a supercomputer, back a long time ago. Of course, HAL is IBM, but like one letter over that whole thing. I really like this scene a lot too. I don't really know what else to say about it other than that. Yeah, you feel a loss and it feels sad, right? Hal is awful.
Yeah,
but you feel sad to lose him.
Yeah, there's an extinction almost happening there. It feels like, again, you can just turn him back on.
Right.
But it doesn't feel like
he doesn't
that.
destroy the discs.
No.
Yeah.
He just pulls them out.
He's just putting him to sleep.
Yeah. He's putting him to sleep, but Hal doesn't know that. And Hal is so desperate. And it fully embodies the fear of mortality.
Yes.
That in beginning of the film with that dissonant noise and voices is sort of meant to instill, I feel like.
Oh, wow,
this is what the movie is trying to like make you face. Because sooner or later you're going to have to. And not just on the micro, but on the macro.
Yeah.
The human race is staring constantly
always
at its death, its mortality, its extinction. And what is your response to that going to be? Is it going to be Hal's, or is it going to be Dave's genius?
Right.
I didn't bring my helmet. My training tells me this is impossible. Let me see, or I should say Dave's response or Moonwatcher's response to that moment of facing death. Like, which will to power, which sense of the idea of will to power are you going to choose to respond to that? And, well, we see what happened to Dave, or what happened to Hal, so let's not do that one, is maybe, I think, what's trying to be said here.
Because you mentioned, humans would all die, but somehow it's like, well, somebody might survive. And like with Hal saying he made his decision. Okay, I'm just going to kill everyone, and then we'll start over. Everything will be fine. And it's like, oh no, a human survived. Right? So let's say there is a winner of the nuclear war, which is like dumb to even like think about. They wouldn't be a winner the way that you would think, right? There would be some way in which they just undercut like their own future, and something unexpected would happen. Oh no, I thought I got them all. Like in our response, I thought I hit all of our enemies' nuclear silos. Oh, they had an extra one in a submarine right off the coast. I didn't know. Like that's happened several times in America's history. Yeah. But it's after this happens that he goes down and he actually accesses the purpose of the mission, and he watches that video.
Yeah, that again.
The dude,
what was his name?
Yeah,
Floyd from early in the movie. Has like the actual objective to this. It's you're going to find this object out there. We found one very similar to it on the moon. It sent a signal to this one you are about to arrive at. I have no idea what's going to happen to you when you find that.
Yeah.
But you're going to make contact with that. And for as long as is possible, please tell us what you see, what you're experiencing. And Dave is now going to be the first human being to move to that next stage, the level above where we're at now.
This is like a chapter, I think, that they sometimes will do in the movie. I don't know, Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite. Mm-hmm. Like,
yes.
I'm trying to remember where this showed up.
But like the title of the chapter in the book or whatever.
Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite is what it's called.
Yeah.
Beyond the Infinite. It's fascinating.
In the novel version, again, one line I really liked that was not in the film is, of course, Dave is now making contact and talking about, and they tell him, as you approach this thing, please just keep, for as long as you can, telling us what you're seeing. And the last thing they hear from him is, oh my God, it's full of stars. I really am sad that moment didn't get into the film somewhere, because it's so great.
Say much from this time on.
In the film version, he's basically alone at this point. And maybe there's purpose to that. And maybe there's a benefit that the film gains from that being true, where he's not in contact, he's totally alone in this moment. I mean, he is alone the moment he crosses that threshold in the novel, but he's like trying to talk to them, trying to tell them, okay, this is what I'm seeing, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. But I just love that last line. It's the end of the chapter there. Oh my God, it's full of stars. And then, of course, in the film version, a lot of the things that you see visually in the film are kind of described as what he's seeing, like the negatives, like the film negatives of like these different terrains and things like that as he's flying around. they described like one planet he arrives at where the sky is bright and white and like the ground he's on is black. So it's like a film negative, and the stars are black in the white sky kind of a thing, right?
Yeah,
Like just kind of this inverse world almost, and just all these alien places and landscapes.
Right.
And he's just going from place to place, has no idea like how to like feel or think about what he's seeing. And it's a little bit more explicit in the novel version about he arrives at one place where it's essentially all he can describe is like a graveyard for alien technology.
A bunch of like old
just a bunch of ships and stuff that are just
surrounding,
floating around in this place. Yeah. This may have at one point been like, you know, a fuel stop, a pit stop on the way, you know, from the stars, but now is abandoned. There's nothing there. They don't show any of that kind of stuff that's more explicit. No. This is entirely meant to just fill your eyeballs with crazy visuals and sound. Yeah. And you just have to feel what you're feeling by looking at that, and in your own mind, try to find an explanation for it. That's the exercise for the entire end of this movie. Yeah. Is entirely on you, the viewer, because Kubrick will do nothing to explain to you or give you even the slightest hint of an idea of how you should feel about what you're seeing. This is totally now an intimate moment between the visuals that are on screen and how they are affecting you as the viewer. And whatever you come out of that with is the answer.
Sure.
But it's still fun to share our own,
what it meant,
experiences with that and what they meant. Yeah. So I think you have a lot more notes on this than I do. So I kind of want to turn it back over to you and let you go.
I do. It's first off, there's a sunrise on Jupiter, so that's another thing. Like the sun is there. The obelisk is black. You almost don't even really see it
it's hard to
as
see
you're approaching it. And then it's like, well, when do you touch it, right? And that question is not answered in the movie. You are forever getting closer to it, right? It envelops the whole screen, and you never actually technically make contact. Yep. It's almost like Zeno's paradox.
It's like a gate.
Yeah, but you just start going into... I feel like you just keep getting ever closer to it, almost as if like time is stopping, right? Yeah. And you experience what is beyond the infinite. Now, how would you depict beyond the infinite in film? Like, what would you do? I don't know, but maybe something like this could be it. There's a few very important things that happen, though, that I think were done purposefully with a specific reason. One of them is that the colors that you're seeing are going through a vertical corridor when he first enters it, right? And at some point throughout the journey, that kind of shifts sideways, and then it becomes a horizontal corridor. And that's when things start to feel a little bit different. It's almost like a perspective shift of 90 degrees from the vertical to the horizontal. I do kind of feel like I know what that might be saying, but some of it would be like when you see the sunrise, it's going up, right? But the universe is a disk. Like, we happen to be viewing it from a weird kind of perpendicular angle to what's actually happening. It's less so, I mean, what's actually happening? That's a weird statement. That's
a poignant statement. What is actually happening?
That's possibly difficult to know. Difficult to say. But at the very least, the way that the universe is laid out in this way, it would actually make more sense to put your head sideways, and that the sun, as opposed to going up, is actually going horizontally. It's going left to right, and right to left, right? Yeah, maybe from the North Pole or South Pole, you could view it in something like that manner. Yeah. But from where we are on the Earth, we tend to view it from looking at it. Oh, it's going up from our perspective. But the way the universe, or the way the galaxies and solar system is laid out, it's like flat. And we don't see it that way, right? We end up seeing things as though they're vertical.
This is Ender's Game. The enemy's gate is down, right? Where it changes the whole way they think about it, where they put their feet towards the gate.
Exactly.
A different way of thinking about space.
Yeah.
And they're going downwards. You don't look at it as across. You look at it as, I'm falling towards them.
There you go. Exactly. Right? Yeah. So once again, it's a perspective shift. Right. And that perspective shift that he has during this experience is that of viewing things vertically to viewing things horizontally. And that almost is what gives him this like crazy, massive insight, right? Like, whoa, the level plane, right, that extends this way it's just different from the vertical that goes up and down.
Right.
I would guess that there's probably some moral question here too, that the good and bad paradigm, no, beyond good and evil, up, down, good, bad, see things evenly, left, right instead of up, down, because there's less of a value judgment with left, right. That eliminates the distinction between facts and values just in general. That eliminates like the purpose of values, which so I don't know how I feel about it, but I do feel like if he's going to be Nietzschean with this, that might actually be what it's saying. It's referring to getting a beyond good and evil, right? Getting out of the vertical paradigm and instead viewing everything in it from a horizontal paradigm.
Well,
I don't see what that does, but it's just a perspective shift.
This is exactly. Yeah. That's what we've been talking about. This whole analysis is perspective shift.
Yeah.
In the same way that a starving group of man-apes could not see the food all around them,
right,
with the antas, the tapirs.
Think
about in the sense that we are trapped in a three-dimensional universe. I guess you could call it four-dimensional, time as a dimension, but anyway, a three-dimensional universe. We understand space in three dimensions: the X, the Y, and the Z.
Yeah.
What kind of epiphany can you imagine?
It's hard to imagine,
if all of a sudden you could just perceive another dimension.
Yeah,
and how that would change
unfathomable
everything about how you think about the universe and the world. And that's exactly what this moment is for Dave.
Yeah.
It is his brain unlocking new dimensions, new perspectives.
You say unlock. Once again, visually, you put the key in vertically and you turn it horizontally. That is the act of unlocking something.
Yes.
Yeah.
The brain is, and again, how do you apply this to the conflicts that you face in your day-to-day life?
Right.
It's something like that.
Yeah,
there is this moment.
That's why people sometimes will like dogs or something. They do it with their ears, but they will tilt their heads to kind of figure out what something is because, well, maybe I'm not looking at it right,
Yes, exactly. There is this, you can train yourself to avoid what is instinctual, which is to follow the routine, which is to do what has worked before, which is to continue. Don't break what isn't, or don't try to fix what isn't broken.
All right, that whole
Stick
thing.
with the same routine.
Right.
Do what works. But that will not work for you tomorrow. So how comfortable can you become in your life when you reach that point, being able to unlock that inner part of the mind, or exercise a muscle, maybe is a better analogy there,
something like
to
that,
be able to zoom out of this like laser focused point of where you're at and see what is around it.
Yeah.
That's almost how I imagine in a very unfathomable way.
I know.
It would be like
how do you even imagine
to have a fourth dimension introduced to your limited brain that all of a sudden you understand what that is now.
Right.
You just get it instinctually, intuitively. The fourth dimension makes sense.
Right.
That's what it feels like to come up with an out-of-the-box solution to something or to solve a really hard puzzle that you were stuck on forever and ever and ever. And I can't, what's the solution? And it just happens.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is it's a muscle. You have to work to be able to do that. And the more that you do that, the more comfortable that you become in those inflection points, those high stake moments of conflict where it's like, oh, everything or nothing, this is it, we're going to die. And you are able to suppress the desire to try to use your strength, your physical strength to overcome that, and instead are able to find that alternate perspective that resolves it in this beautifully simplistic way and that pushes you forward into that next inflection point where you'll have to do that again
and again. Yeah.
And so that's kind of what this whole end of the movie to me is displaying, or at least the way that I look at it now. It's a super uncomfortable, especially at first. The choral dissonance and all these colors and weird stuff.
Yeah.
But like what muscle are you working as you see these images to try to shift what you would typically look at this and try to interpret it as and find some other beautiful explanation for it is almost an exercise of the viewer that Kubrick is like asking you to do as you see these. So that whole element that I think a lot of people are talking about when they talk about why the film version is better than the novel version, it doesn't give you the answers. You have to work at it. I think I get it in that sense.
It can speak more to your experience, your soul, yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I have also been open about this in the past, though I want to be very clear. I do not condone.
Oh, by the way, neither does Stanley Kubrick condone the use of
psychedelics, right? But I have
Kubrick never himself ever did that, which is
shocked me when I learned that.
I was shocked. I
could
shocked.
not believe that the man who made this movie had never tried psychedelics before.
That's crazy.
That does not make sense. That does not compute.
I didn't. Everything I know about this movie and what it is and what it means and who likes it and who doesn't screams to me that Kubrick was on LSD making this thing, and he was not.
He was not. But what's really funny about that, and you kind of were telling me the story of this, the movie was not necessarily well received.
No, not
at first, particularly by critics and prominent people. It had this like wave of an underground sort of acceptance and which, you know, I think even for a time they were talking about, you know, we should stop the run of the film in theaters. But there were some, managers who were saying, hold on, we're getting some waves of some younger people, who are coming into the theater to watch this movie. Maybe we should give it a chance here to see what happens. And apparently a lot of people in that kind of hippie movement that...
Yeah, John Lennon made this big. He did an interview on a show. I don't remember if it was Johnny Carson or not, but he went on a show and they asked him what his day-to-day routine was. And he's like, well, on the weekends, I take a hit of LSD and I go watch 2001, is what he said. And it was just like... but maybe not Carson. I wonder if you could have said that on TV cable at the time. Yeah. But John Lennon famously loved 2001 and gave it a huge boost amongst that crowd, the hippie crowd. Yeah. And that's really what made the film successful.
Yeah. And there's this wave of young minds, people whose minds are more open, more malleable, less entrenched in routine, less sure in like, I have found my path and this is what works for me. Old heads who think they've got it all figured out. That's the wave of people that accepted what this was and understood it, I feel like.
To the extent that you can understand it.
You can.
Yeah. Although I would also say that those are also the same people who became the boomers of our current generation who are maybe they're too in love with 2001 and they like, oh, it's the future, the sci-fi, all this stuff. And they love what it did for them when they were younger and they can't think out of the box of whatever Kubrick put them in now, which is a box and it is a specific way of seeing things.
Yes.
And just the whole paradigm of, everything, we got to reclaim 2001. We've got to, and instead Kubrick is saying, let 2001 go. And do the next thing.
Next thing.
I have noticed that a lot of people don't.
Let
yes, let it go, man.
Please let Star Wars go. Back to the Future and all your favorite 80s movies go.
Yeah. Planet of the Apes.
Let it go. Let Jurassic Park go. Let it go, dude.
Yeah.
What is the next thing? Stop like entrenching yourself in the same routine. That leads to extinction. That leads to death. Yes, okay. Yes. So now. That's all super fascinating stuff.
There's the death of chaos, which is dissolution, which is becoming too not in one place, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the death of solidification, of atrophy, of like you're not moving, you're not doing anything, you're dead. But life is, as Rumi said with the butterfly wings, life is a butterfly's wings have no use in being up or down, but in the movement between the two, that's what makes the butterfly fly. Just like a hand is no use closed or open, but in being able to move between the two, that's what gives it the value. So we in this movie, we're railing against the atrophy of the closed hand, but there's a similar trouble with just the dispersion of everything, and that's also death, right? So you can die from dissolution, or you can die from too much solution. You need the solidus. You need the solidus.
You need to be solidus, dude.
Solidus
you need to be solidus
solution.
snake.
Where
Solidus
you're more
answer.
malleable, right? You can be solid
right in
or
that,
liquid.
right in that space between the two.
Yeah.
So I have experimented with psychedelics, and there is something to this visual of moving through a tunnel. I don't know why.
Interesting.
That is a deeply human thing. And I have thought about this a lot.
Well, you know what Freud would say, right?
Why don't you explain it?
It's the birth canal. Right?
Yeah.
It's birth. It is moving through a tunnel.
Yeah.
That's how you start life. You're in a tunnel. You move through it. You go out.
That's the next step. And that's essentially
this
what
movie,
this is.
Yes, it's a rebirth.
This is a death of one thing, a rebirth of a new thing.
And that symbolism could not be more clear. When I first watched this movie, I was like 15, and I was like, what's the freaking baby doing at the end, man? This is ridiculous. Giant, massive space baby, you know, going to go control
Star
the future.
Child. Yeah.
He is, honestly, I can just think of quoting Jesus right now, but, you know, unless man is born again, he can't inherit the future, the infinite that exists. And also, unless you become as a little child, you can't enter into, like, almost these sayings that have become so common that we don't even really think about them anymore, is in this movie has a different way of, like, taking literally Jesus's words and then being like, but here is a possibility, that a way that type of thing can happen. This might be what that means and has always meant, you know. Very, very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, and this is what everyone who's ever done psychedelics will tell you. I cannot tell you. I cannot. It is impossible. It's like another dimension opens up in your mind. It is like this paradigm shift that you cannot understand unless you've experienced it. But as I have reflected on my experiences, and particularly on that visual, I do this a lot when I go to sleep. I don't know about other people. When I go to sleep at night, I'm actually trying my very hardest to consciously be aware of the moment.
Oh,
so I will fall asleep thinking, focusing, meditating, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, that would be meditation.
When is the moment when I'm asleep now?
That's so hard.
I
get scared of that moment.
So difficult.
Yeah.
It is so difficult. But there is almost this period where you'll just have this really wild, weird, irrational, illogical thought.
Yeah.
And then I might sway back again and go, that did not make sense. I was asleep there for a second.
Yeah.
But it's like
or an hour. You don't know how long.
it's like this weaving where it's like you just slip past that solidus line. You can't hang on it. It's just like dissolve, just like all of a sudden you're here. Yeah. And okay, I'm back to being conscious. I'm back to thinking about what I'm doing, being intentional about this falling asleep experience, trying to record it for later to reflect. And then all of a sudden I've slipped again. And it's just my mind is doing something really whack.
When there has been a few times in my life where, several, actually quite a few, where I feel the slipping of consciousness. Yeah. And there is a fear that actually induces. Now, a lot of times you'll jump or jolt because you feel like you're falling. Oh, exactly.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yes.
But it's also... It's so funny because I'm trying to sleep. I'm trying to fall asleep. But every now and then, if I'm a little too aware of what's happening with my mental state, I actually start to get this, and this gave me insomnia for many years. I still sort of, I guess, have it, but it's not as bad as it used to be. I get this weird foreboding feeling before I'm about to lose consciousness every now and then when I'm a little bit too alert. And anytime I can sense when it's happening, and I feel like my mind actually has this, my whole body kind of reacts against it. Like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't fall asleep. You're losing it. You're losing yourself. Don't do it. Don't do it. And I'm like, I'm trying to sleep here. And I can't. Whenever I feel it too much, I end up, it actually does induce a little bit of a fear of crossing a threshold. And that makes it very difficult for me to sleep some nights.
Yeah. This is really hard to explain, but I think I'm trying to get around to a point. What you just described is where the conscious ego gets turned off and the subconscious is given room to come up and play, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
There's a moment of control that is lost there. that is the scary part. And this all relates to death in and of itself. Death is this current ego, this current memory system slipping away and being lost, and then what is there, right?
Right.
And in a similar way,
well, the one light, the sun sets, and now you have a bajillion fragmented tiny little lights all over, which are the stars.
And there's this whole
images.
Other thing underneath that you can't control. And so it's the element of losing control is what I'm getting at. There is this you're right here, I'm in control, and there's just not a point that you can like concretely grasp in which you see the foot falling over the other side of that line. You just slipped there.
Yeah.
And you can't quite feel how.
This is true of thresholds in general. Like we try to draw lines around things and demarcate borders, but the fact is it's actually very difficult.
Yeah.
Like where does a mountain start? Why is Pluto not a planet? Why is Europe a continent? Like I don't know. We just made lines and we drew boundaries, and this is in and this one's out.
Yeah.
But anytime you're crossing a boundary, there is it's like you're entering, I don't know, there's something that happens and you can feel it, but you don't know when it happened.
Yes.
You can't tell when it happened.
Yes. And there is a similar sort of experience to this sort of like going into that psychedelic experience. It's not a concrete like, all right, I'm in it now. It's this slip. And it can be really, really frightening for people who aren't like prepared for it. If maybe you were just pressured into like doing this at a party or something, and it's like everyone else is doing it, but you don't like understand like how this experience can be shaped in ways that make it positive or negative.
I've heard,
and why.
I've heard lots of stories.
So like this by no means should be treated as some recreational like party thing.
Yeah, just to do for fun.
Especially if you have issues with anxiety
or
and
schizophrenia,
like
history of schizophrenia in
your family or things like
that stuff. Yeah.
So there's reasons to be careful, but if you prepare yourself the right way, and if you have the correct expectation, which should honestly be not to have an expectation.
Well, that's hard. You're right.
But
that's
your
hard.
mind should be prepared and accepting of not having an expectation. Anyway, you slip into this place and you start having these visuals, and I've thought so much about that visual.
Yeah, me too.
Depending on what you've taken and how strong or whatever it is, these can be very vivid, in which your eyes are open and you're seeing these kinds of visuals, maybe like an ayahuasca type experience, right? Just a super potent visual experience where even with your eyes open, you're like seeing these tunnels and these shapes and colors and stuff. Like, why is it that your brain goes to that visual in this state? What is it about that visual that is inherent in the human brain? So I've thought about that a lot. And other times it's a closed eye visual where you open your eyes and you can see mostly normally. Maybe you feel like you can see more detail, or the carpet feels like it's dancing, or textures like are crazy. I had one experience where I looking yourself in the mirror is, oh my goodness, what an experience.
Oh, really?
When you look yourself in the mirror on this stuff,
that's fascinating.
You can see in all the metaphorical ways that we've talked about with what mirrors represent in stories.
Oh, yeah.
You have that kind of experience looking at yourself in the mirror on this in a way that is just phenomenally fascinating.
Interesting.
One time, my face in the same way that, have you ever seen like AI video where it's like every frame it's like slowly shifting, so like you might have like an image of a face, but like over the course of 3 seconds there's so many shifts in every frame that it kind of changes into a different looking face, and then like shifts again. My face was doing that. As I was looking myself in the mirror, my face was AI animated, like shifting around and changing.
Wow.
It's just crazy stuff, right?
That's
but
funny.
the tunnel is more or less what I'm really trying to get at. So I've thought about that tunnel and that visual, and you're moving through, and we were talking about turning the head horizontally and changing your perspective, and funny picture somebody posted it in the Discord there. I do this thing now, even when I'm going to sleep. I don't know what it is about going to sleep where I like try to experiment all these like.
Because you've done lucid dreaming in the past, right? Like you've been able to do.
I've been able to lucid dream
things. I've
been able to like try to catch the moment in which I've slipped into sleep and wakefulness. And I do this too, where I'm sure a lot of people have done this actually. Say you're looking at lights or something bright, and then you like close your eyes really hard, and like that light. There's like an imprint of it in your vision, and you can kind of like swish your eyes around and like move it around and just do weird stuff visually. So like I'll be experimenting with that kind of thing. I'm always doing that, like when I'm going to sleep, like open my eyes, close my eyes really hard, close my eyes halfway, close my eyes just lightly. Right. Like how does it change the visual? And kind of meditating in a sense on visuals and things like that. And sometimes the psychedelic experience doesn't produce vivid visuals where you're actually seeing light and colors. There's just shades of it. So like your eyes are closed and you're seeing the darkness behind your eyes, but there are still shapes in it. So I'm like experimenting with this, and what I feel like I have discovered is with enough experimentation and enough meditation and just like focusing on this, that visual is actually there behind your eyes all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, you're not really seeing it. You're not really, unless you're focusing. But like there's something unconscious that is always there behind your eyes, behind your visual,
true.
in your brain somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
That movement through the tunnel and the shapes and the colors is always there. It's just, can you find it?
That's fascinating. I like that. I like that. I have a lot of theories that are similar to that one.
And I'm not sure that I have any sort of sufficient answer. I'm sure I'll continue to meditate on this the rest of my life.
I think that's cool.
But
I like that.
I have arrived at, this is an inherently human symbol, visual experience that means something. And I don't know what it means, and maybe it can mean many things.
Right.
But I think it's in all of us.
I think so, yeah.
And so this visual, as he's like going through the Stargate and just all of these colors and shapes, and it's just moving through like a tunnel, there is something like deeply unconsciously human about that visual that is a striking visual and that is captivating, whether you have experimented with the psychedelics or you haven't. Yeah. Maybe you're more in touch with that and more conscious of it or not. But regardless, there's something about that that is just inherently meaningful somehow. And the way that they accomplished those particular visuals in an era before CGI,
I know, unbelievable,
is
man.
Really impressive.
Really.
Because they captured it really, really accurately.
Extreme. Okay, I see what you're saying.
I don't know how they did that.
Yes, especially if the director...
It's freaking crazy.
Never experienced that.
And that's why it's so surprising to me that he hadn't. How did he know?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting at, because we all know it. We all know that visual.
Right.
Somewhere deep in there unconsciously, we all know it. It's a part of who we are. So I love it. I love whatever that means about the human condition that this movie's trying to drive at. That symbol, that visual is a part of it.
Yeah,
it's
just
an important part of it.
Here's a good one. It's constant movement. It is constantly moving.
Moving forward all the time.
It's not stopping. It's not just showing beautiful images that are just, here we are not moving and here's an image. It's constantly moving towards something. I don't know what or where, but it's constant movement.
Evolving movement forward.
And then you see like those cubes. There's like some number of cubes out there too. I tried. I did my best. I don't really know what a lot of this stuff means. But it was fascinating. And it did also remind me of the Two Towers. No. The Return of the King? The Two Towers. When Gandalf? Gandalf is like every second was like a life age of the earth. And he saw, basically Peter Jackson does a Stanley Kubrick to that, to show Gandalf as he's kind of passing through whatever divine realm he goes to then come back as Gandalf the White after
Beyond
death.
the
it's
infinite,
death,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Yes. Anyways, I actually think Jackson did a pretty good job there. Although when
Totally.
I was a kid, and even still today, I'm like, this is the weirdest part of this whole movie. And he definitely didn't hold on it too long, which he shouldn't have. Tolkien wouldn't have wanted him to, put it that way. But what I have here is that you're basically just seeing the raw patterns of the universe themselves, right? All we can really see in the material that we see now are instantiations of patterns, right? Like you just see, I don't see square, I see the square light right there. Or I only see things as the particulars become manifest to me, but I can't see the pattern itself, the pattern that is hiding behind all of the things that I see each in each particular form.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like in this case, David's eyes are opened up to the patterns themselves, the equations and the whatever it is that is behind the universe that makes the universe what it is, and that we can get at through things like math. Or music or something like that, where it's like, but then to just see, it's almost like when Neo can see all the ones and zeros of the simulation, right? It's just like there's the moment where all of a sudden, boom, I get it. I am now not seeing the objects. I'm seeing through the objects. I'm seeing behind the objects, the importance, the meaning, or even the patterns, or like all of that kind of stuff. He's seeing beyond just the object itself, which we can't seem to see behind, right? We see a thing, we just see the thing. Yeah. But a physicist would be able to tell you that this microphone right here is 99% empty space.
Yes.
The atoms don't touch, right? Like they're far apart. Yet, the way I see it is, what are you talking about? This is one solid single object. This is billions of objects.
Moving
and
very slowly.
Mostly is just empty space, actually, which is like, but I can't see that. I can't perceive that. I can't do it. Yet it seems like Dave got some ability to do something like this, which then rendered him as a little child. Now, the sequence where he's seeing himself as an old man comes after this, right?
Yes. Eventually.
Yeah. And he's still in the ship this whole time.
Yeah, after having gone through the big psychedelic part of this, he just finds his ship inside of basically a fancy hotel room.
Yeah. But he's alone.
Where he's going to be allowed to comfortably live out the remainder of his days until he's able to die and transform into the next life form.
So the perspective shift is fascinating because the floor is lit as though it was like tile lights that are normally on the ceiling. In fact, you saw these same tile lights in the space station itself, but they're on the roof. They're lights. And now they're on the floor. He's sort of upside down maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Once again, just signifying the idea of a perspective shift. He's now viewing the world in this upside down way.
Right. Yeah. And I think what's also fascinating about this, again, for those who understand or have been through psychedelic experiences, it plays with your perception of time in ways that can be really cool and also really unsettling and weird. And like there was one time where it was probably the heaviest dose I've ever done, which is pretty extreme. But I'm a person who like alcohol has no effect on me, basically, unless I were to just like drink myself to being so nauseous and feeling so bad that it would not be worth it. But I even pain meds in the hospital. Right. Like I have to take a much higher dose than the average person does to feel any effect. So that being said, I went all in one time, and what happened?
Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Well, both. That's what I'm getting at. Really, is it was this perception of time in which simultaneously I could perceive this is going by really fast and this is excruciatingly slow at the same time.
Interesting.
I would look up at the clock and think that 5 hours had passed, but it was really 5 minutes. But really, I felt like it was 5 minutes, but also it felt like a super long time. It was so confusing.
Interesting.
It was so confusing. But it's like if I were to hang on the thought of when is this going to end, I kind of want this to be over. Then it started to feel like bad. 10 hours. But if I was focused on the self-reflection I was doing, you know, my intentions going into this and what I was trying to think about, it was like you're just flying through thoughts. You're having a million thoughts a second. And it's just like, whoa, 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 all these epiphanies, all these thoughts, blah, blah, blah. And that feels fast. And so it's like it's a simultaneous thing that is impossible to describe. And so he's living however many decades of life in this room by himself.
Instant,
that's actually happening in real time. He's living years and years and years and years there.
So it feels long and slow at the same time.
Long and slow.
And fast
but at the
and
same
short.
time,
Both.
he's jumped
in
these moments where he's just skipping to the next part.
Right.
They're happening both simultaneously. And it's captured so perfectly. I love how like he walks into the bathroom.
Yeah.
And then he looks out and he sees himself older eating at the table.
And
there's just a moment where he stops and he like turns around to like look back in there because he knows he's watching himself.
Right.
But then it's not there anymore.
Right. And now he is
simultaneously in both places.
Right.
And there's just a moment where he felt that and knew that and felt the time skip, but then returning back into a different mode of thought in which it's back to normal time again. And then it skips again when he's in the bed, right? So for the purpose of the film, which is wrapping up and working to the end, it's focusing on the time skips, which he is also experiencing along with us. But he also lived all those years and the excruciating long time of being alone in this place and just waiting to die. It's crazy. But that's also a very unsettling, weird aspect of how psychedelics can affect your perception of time. And which is, again, there's no way a person who has not done psychedelics
got it
can accurately like show on film like what it feels like. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very, very striking. And I just felt, again, resonates. I feel like the whole experience of psychedelics is this hidden thing that is a part of all of us. All of us have this sort of like perspective shift or paradigm inside of us. It's just locked away.
Yeah.
And
I think so.
Like, if you choose to open that door and sort of like experience it, you'll sort of like, oh, I understand what that feels like, but then every time you come back, you can't explain it. You can't.
I've heard this too. Yeah.
So like you don't really understand it.
Right. Do you really?
And that's kind of what this movie is.
Right. There you go.
It's just it's diving at a truth that is somewhere hidden below the surface of our conscious minds. And for maybe like a moment you can touch it and sort of like emotionally, intrinsically, spiritually understand. But then if you try to turn around and explain that to somebody, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
We've been here talking about this for 3 hours now. And I did my best, but like I can't really explain how this movie spoke to me on this viewing of it. And words will never be sufficient, unfortunately. And that's why Kubrick said,
it's a good thing.
He does not want people to try to do what we're doing right now.
Right.
Like
don't analyze.
Do not try to
every movie.
Rationally or in sort of an academic sense try to explain what this movie is.
And
That's not what I'm making it for. I'm not making it for that. I'm making it for dude sitting there taking his LSD before he walked into the theater or whatever, having whatever experience is going on in his brain.
Right. It's a very specific individual.
That's what the movie is trying to get you to touch and like come in contact with, because somewhere in there is the paradigm shift where you start to see the tapers and the food all around you, where you realize the answer to your problem in your life that you can't find an answer for because you're not allowing yourself outside of your routine.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that touching of whatever that is subconsciously is the answer to whatever problem our society faces. And unless you're allowing yourself to come in contact with that perspective shift, that potential, in the human being that rests down there somewhere, you are going to take the how path into extinction.
Sure, yeah.
Instead of the Wildermacht that will move you forward to the next. You got to get in touch with that somehow. And there's many more ways than one to do it. But psychedelics for some people are it. For some people it's meditation. For some people it's whatever. It's many thousands, millions of answers to that question. But get to it somehow is sort of like what I came out of this film thinking was the answer to what it means.
Very cool. I like that a lot. So one of the other fascinating things about the obelisk is that it is vertical. It's this vertical thing, right? Mm-hmm. But at the very end, as he's kind of reaching towards the obelisk and the camera kind of moves into it, it transforms because by virtue of the fact that it fills the space. Okay, this isn't my thought. I got this from some dude who spent his life analyzing 2001. All right. There's a ton of them, by the way. There are a lot of people who have really dedicated a lot of time to finding out what this film means. But he was saying that he's asking the question, what is the obelisk? What does the obelisk represent? And his answer is the obelisk itself is the dimensions of a widescreen film. Of film as projected. What maybe, I don't know if I'm thinking IMAX or just Super 35. I don't know what he was saying specifically, but he was saying that you just take that and stand it up on itself, right? Mm-hmm. And that there's some commentary on movies and screens, and that is the obelisk, right? And that in a way, 2001 is it is that thing. And then I start thinking too, because once the camera goes into the obelisk, you then just have a black screen in front of you. That's all that you see. But in the movie theater, it is the obelisk just on its side, right?
Yeah.
And you got to do that perspective shift and look at it a different way. He might be saying something about cinema and how cinema has this ability to change people, to make people see things in a different way, right? Which is certainly true. But I thought that was really interesting, that it is a screen itself. And that, as we've gone into the future, at least in the last, for a while now, I don't know, last 30 years, that 20 years maybe, screens have increasingly stopped being seen on wide, and they've moved back vertical
again.
So and people watch things on their phone.
Okay. For
in
people
a vertical
who
manner.
are audio only, that's what I was doing a minute ago. I grabbed my phone and I was doing the horizontal, the vertical tilt.
But we are in a time where entertainment and screens and this type of stuff is shifting from the horizontal up to the vertical. And I wonder what Kubrick would say about that if he were around today. What would he think about people looking at the screens vertically? I don't know. I'm just saying that, and it seems correct. It seems like that is what the obelisk represents, is the screen in a movie theater. If you want to go experience the obelisk from your ancestors, go to the movie theater and watch
2001.
Watch 2001. Yes, I hope. I don't know. Maybe he was that elite in that sense, like my movie. This isn't just any movie; it's my movie. I was actually going to say like Bridget Jones' Diary or something like that, because you go to a movie theater doesn't mean it's going to have that big of an effect on you.
Sure.
But he sees himself, he sees and experiences at the same time. He sees it and also experiences his own death, right, at the very end. And as he reaches forward, he is now reborn as a new man, right? Mm-hmm. And
a new being, a new life
new
form.
Something. The book goes into a lot more detail about what this is.
Yeah.
He has a lot of mucked.
I do not prefer to interpret this as a literal fetus flying through space.
Yeah, I prefer not to as well.
I prefer to look at it as a metaphor for whatever it is that he has become. He's in the very freaking developmental stage of it.
Right.
But it is powerful, whatever it is.
Yes, whatever it is. There's also a very poignant moment at the very end where as we see the baby, the camera kind of comes around it. I don't know. He must have had a statue or something made of, or a wax something or other made of the Star Child. But the camera, the movie basically
I wonder if
ends.
it was an animatronic.
Well, did it move? I don't
can't
remember much.
right now.
I think it was like a.
I just
statue.
thought, I wonder if that's what it was. But
so it's a baby, and the movie ends when the camera goes right into the eye line of the child, right? Mm-hmm. So the movie ends with a fourth wall break where the baby is looking directly at you, right? And then the screen goes black.
Yes.
Right? And I don't know, it's like passing it on to you now. Like you are the baby, or the baby sees you, or it's in a whole new dimension now. And so like it's been here all along / just showed up, right? But for you can see it and it can see you, right? There's this weird, I don't know, there's this weird kind of feeling that I think that shot elicits. That's really, really interesting.
I wanted to read just the final paragraph, which I think is basically the final chapter of the book.
I have another thing to say about the monolith, because it is a screen, but the monolith and the screen are also both a door, and they also share the same properties, aspects, ratio of a typical door, right? It's a door to transport you somewhere, and that is what a movie is, and that is what the obelisk is, right? It's all three things at once.
Yeah. So it's more than one paragraph, but it's very short. It's the final chapter, chapter 47, Star Child of 2001: A Space Odyssey. There before him, a glittering toy no star child could resist, floated the planet Earth with all its peoples. He had returned in time. Down there on that crowded globe, the alarms would be flashing across the radar screens. The great tracking telescopes would be searching the skies. The history, as men knew it, would be drawing to a close. 1,000 miles below, he became aware that a slumbering cargo of death had awoken and was stirring sluggishly in its orbit. The feeble energies it contained were no possible menace to him, but he preferred a cleaner sky. He put forth his will.
Yeah, I remember this.
Important word. And the circling megatons flowered in a silent detonation that brought a brief false dawn to half the sleeping globe. Then he waited, marshaling his thoughts and brooding over his still untested powers. For though he was a master of the world, he was not quite sure what to do next.
Right.
But he would think of something.
That's so good. I think it's brilliant.
It's
brilliant,
unbelievably poignant
and horrific as well. It's like
just. I could speak about that for 2.5 podcast episodes over an hour. Just that.
You know what I love?
It's so good.
There's a sinister way to look at that as well.
Oh, yeah.
And who's to say that that's not what was intended? But I think it was a brilliant choice to depict this as a baby. Not even like a preborn fetus. Like not even
a baby.
Like little baby that's
developing fetus.
A developing fetus in the womb or something like that. That is what this is. And what's so good about that is that if he chose to show Dave returning as himself with all this power, or as a being of just like intense light and, power, whatever it is, if he showed himself even as an old man or something like that, it comes across very different than if it's a little fetus baby, right? That's just like, you trust it more, first of all, as a viewer. You are more likely to interpret this as a good thing instead of I don't know, like it can be scary. If they were really to show Dave and what his being is like now, which is not very easy to show, I would guess, this was the right way to do it instead of trying to actually show Dave as like this puppet master, like brooding over the earth, which is kind of the image I got from the end of the book, which is fine. I actually really like the end of the book. I love the imagery it gives me, but it gave me the imagery of the same character.
It's almost like what's it, Dr. Manhattan from
the new
Watchmen.
Yeah, Watchmen.
When I read the novel, I almost had a similar like Dr. Manhattan. What do you call that? Adonis. Godlike man,
yes, of course,
like
me too.
Arms open like this, detonating all the nukes as they fly towards him. No, like
that's what the book showed me.
It is such an underdeveloped being.
I know,
and it is also that powerful.
But there's like an innocence that comes with the child as well.
Yeah,
it's like you just it's more palatable than the way it's presented in the book, which is like, me, because it kind of breaks the ego as well. Like, you identify with Dave as you're watching this movie. Like, oh my gosh, you feel like you are him. But they sort of break that in a couple different ways towards the end of this movie. And then they show us this baby that we don't have any attachment to. We don't feel like we are the baby, you know, like, oh, this is different. This is a whole different thing. Whereas with the book, I kind of felt like, oh, what if I was the one and I was there? The movie doesn't give you that. The movie basically says, like, this is a being that doesn't even have an ego yet. You can't even be this or know what it's like to be this thing, because it's so beyond you.
You're trapped in your ego.
Yet at the same time, you once were that thing too, right?
Yes.
It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. I love the way that it's a baby. I made fun of it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And only upon this final recent viewing have I been like, this is great.
It's
this is the best
bizarre
choice.
Imagery.
Yeah, it is.
And bizarre imagery makes you recoil. It makes you uncomfortable. It makes you, and that's the whole freaking point of the movie. You're supposed to get past
when the baby looks right at you and it's like, that feels
weird bizarreness.
Yeah.
And force yourself to look at it anyways. And that's when you start thinking outside of your routine and your natural instincts of where to go with that. And you come up with touching that thing under the unconscious that gives you a spark of an idea that changes your perspective on things. And that's the exercise of watching this film. I think it's what it's really diving at, what it means to be human and what it means to adapt into whatever we're going to be when we stop being human in the millions of years from now, if we're still around. If we don't turn on all the radar screens and flash all the alarms and shoot each other down first along the way, right? If we don't go that path. But I'm repeating myself at this point.
Very good. Well,
so that's
my
it.
Notes are done, so this is it.
Hope you guys liked it. Hope it was worth listening to 3 hours of that.
It's more than 3 hours.
But appreciate you. Thank you for watching. And we will have a new poll on Patreon here pretty soon for the next film that we want to cover. So look out for that. Okay. Till then, peace out.